Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Marty Ross, and this is another Conversations with Marty Ross MD tonight. As you know, these are webinars where we talk about Lyme disease. I'm glad to see there's a number of familiar names here again tonight, and that you keep getting some value out of this. I also see that there's a number of new people here tonight as well, too. For those of you that are new, welcome. I hope you can get some information that will help you here. If you are new here, there's a couple ways that you can participate. Number one, write a question to me. Be bold, as I've been saying here lately. And the way you could do that is on the bottom of your screen on the right-hand side, there's a chat box. You can write your question to me through there. The only thing I ask as you write your question is don't hit the enter key until the whole thing is written. If you try to use the enter key to create paragraphs, it actually sends your question to me in multiple parts. And sometimes they get lost with the other questions that people are sending me. So it gets to be very complicated to follow your question. Okay. Second way that you can participate is to just see what answers I give to the questions. I'm going to read those questions out loud so that people in the recorded version can hear them. But in the live version, you actually be able to read the questions on the screen at the bottom. So you can follow along and see where I go with my responses there too. So tonight is the last webinar of this year, and it's fitting, I guess, that it's on the solstice. Thank God we're finally here, especially in Seattle. We get darker and darker all the time. Now we can start climbing back out to getting more days with longer periods of sunshine. And as most of the country is gripped in, or the central country and most of the northern states are gripped in freezing cold temperatures, we in Seattle are too. So those of you that are having your temperatures be 20 degrees less than normal, I feel for you. We're in the same situation here. So I hope you're all in a place that you can be warm tonight. And then also, here we are on the verge of the major holidays, and I wish all of you happy holidays as well too tonight. I am creating a recording as usual, and somewhere in the morning, somewhere between 9 and 9:30 in the morning, we'll get that an email out to you saying that the recording is ready. And it will also have forms that you can use to sign up for the series of webinars that I'll be hosting in January. So I will be off next week, but I will have webinars again in January. Okay, and so I think that covers most of the business issues here. Why don't we go ahead and get started here? Let's see here. Hello, Kathy. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Ross. I had a positive PCR for Chlamydia pneumoniae in a blood sample. What are your thoughts on the significance of this finding, and can this germ cause a chronic infection with Lyme-Bartonella-like symptoms, and your experience in treating if it is of significance? Thank you. All right, that's a good question. So first of all, let me talk about what a PCR is. So PCR, everyone, stands for polymerase chain reaction. All right, so basically what that is, it's a way of measuring the amount of DNA of the germ or RNA of the germ that you have in you, basically. So it's a way of testing for the genetic material. And if it is positive, it does definitely mean a germ is in you, okay? That compares to if we do antibody testing in a way of doing like a ELISA test or Western blot or immunoblot test. Those are just measuring, has your immune system reacted against a germ, but those tests don't tell us whether the germ is still in you or out of you, okay? All right, now, when it comes to Chlamydia pneumoniae and something called Mycoplasma pneumoniae, those are two bacteria that some of my colleagues will try to address in treating Lyme. And generally, I don't. So let me try to explain why. I have a differing opinion than them. So the issue with Chlamydia pneumoniae and Mycoplasma pneumoniae is that if we were to pull 100 healthy people off the street, these are healthy people, these are people without any health problems at all, we would find laboratory evidence that they have Chlamydia or Mycoplasma pneumoniae in them about 10% of people to 20% of people. So these are infections that are common even in healthy people. And what they tend not to cause problem in healthy people because the immune system does a good job controlling them. Okay. Now, just measuring PCR in you and finding the DNA of the germ in you does not tell us whether the germ is out of control. All right, whether it's actually causing problems or not. Because again, we can cohabitate with these germs. That is also the situation with some virus infections too, like human herpes virus type 6, human herpes virus type 8. Those are both respiratory herpes viruses. The Epstein-Barr virus, which is the monovirus, and something called cytomegalovirus, okay? So just finding, in those cases, we can't measure PCR tests for them, but we do antibody testing. And again, just finding elevated antibodies does not mean that your immune system has lost the battle against these chronic infections that healthy people cohabitate with, okay? So for instance, I've been following a lot of the discussion about why is it that people have long COVID. And one of the recent ideas that's been raised is that long COVID reactivated their chronic virus infections. That is also an argument that had been made for a long time about chronic fatigue syndrome, that people have chronic fatigue because they have reactivated chronic virus infections. But the truth is, in all of those, in those situations, there's never been any studies done correlating whether when somebody has chronic fatigue or chronic Lyme disease or long COVID, that although they can measure that they've had immune reactions against those viruses, there's nothing that shows they actually have elevated levels of the viruses in them, or what would be a normal level that even healthy people have, okay? So we have to be careful with these chronic infections. Now, it is possible that when you have chronic Lyme, that yes, it is true that maybe these chronic infections do get more active, like a chlamydia pneumoniae, okay? But my approach has always been treat the Lyme, and if they are more active, getting Lyme under control will make it so your immune system can deal with them, okay? The viruses, as well as chlamydia pneumoniae, as well as Mycoplasma pneumonia, okay? Now, what's interesting for chlamydia pneumonia and Mycoplasma pneumoniae is if you have been treating Lyme and if your healthcare practitioners have been doing things to treat for Lyme that lives intracellularly in your cells, they will have had you on antibiotics that should be treating your chlamydia and your Mycoplasma pneumonia, okay? So those intracellular antibiotics are the rifamycins like rifampin and rifabutin, the macrolides like Biaxin, which is clarithromycin, azithromycin, which is Zithromax, those are macrolides, and your tetracyclines like doxycycline, tetracycline, and minocycline, also Bactrim. Those are all intracellular antibiotics. And if you've been using those to treat intracellular Lyme, you've been doing things to take care of your chlamydia pneumoniae, Mycoplasma pneumoniae. Again, I question if you're measuring them, if they really are a problem. But if they are, those antibiotics should take care of them as well, too. Okay? All right. So I hope that gives you some insights on that. Okay? All right. And in terms of what kind of symptoms would you have, supposedly chronic active chlamydia pneumonia and chronic active Mycoplasma pneumonia would give you the same symptoms you have of fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, chronic Lyme disease. Okay? Same thing. There would be no way of distinguishing them. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Kathy, and thanks for your question. Hello, Dave. Was hello, Dr. Ross. I asked a question last week about taking Welchol and my liver ALT elevating. I wanted to follow up to your response in regards to other supplements that I'm also taking. Along with Welchol, 3 tablets a day, I've been taking vitamin C, D, zinc, quercetin, fish oil, curcumin, probiotic, and liposomal glutathione. All except for the fish oils purchased directly from your awesome supplement store. Thank you. I appreciate your shout out there. Also was all capitalized, everyone, too. Would any of these supplements elevate my ALT liver enzymes? I've been on them for over a year. Only thing that changed was that I increased the curcumin to 2 pills 3 times a day instead of 1 pill 3 times a day, and increased Welchol from 2 pills a day to 3 pills a day. Okay, so let me just answer your question there. So no, I haven't seen any of those supplements that you just listed here, the C, D, zinc, quercetin, fish oil, curcumin, probiotic, and liposomal glutathione, I haven't seen any of those increase liver enzymes, nor am I aware of the mechanism by which they would. Okay, I can't think of how they would do that, although it's a good question. Let's see. Also, you mentioned in previous webinars that you prefer to use natural mold binders like Mycopol and GI Detox instead of prescriptions. Do you have a preference between the two? I see GI Detox contains aloe vera, and I've read that aloe vera can also elevate liver enzymes. Is this true? Do any of these have side effects? Let me see. So, I tend to use the two interchangeably. I'm not aware of aloe vera actually having effects of elevating liver enzymes. And it seems you've read that, but I'm not aware of that. So I can't make a direct comment on that. If you do have elevated liver enzymes and you've read that it could lead to elevated liver enzymes, then stop it and try the other product here, basically, and see if that makes a difference for you, okay? And for everyone, Dave has asked this, asked part of this question last week too. And the one comment I had that I made, I think, of that and last time was that Welchol, which is a prescription cholesterol binding medicine, similar to cholestyramine. Cholestyramine is a powder. Welchol isn't a pill. That I'm not aware that it would. That I don't think I have not seen it elevate liver enzymes before. Okay. The other comment I made to Dave is that rarely I have actually seen that elevated liver enzymes can be caused by Lyme, a Lyme infection. If you treat the Lyme, that will go away. But if you have ongoing elevated liver enzymes, that it's a good idea to check for the common virus infections that can do that. And that would be hepatitis A, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. You would want to have your doctor make sure that they've looked at that. Okay. All right. Anyhow, thanks for our question, Dave. Good luck to you. Hello, Jim. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thanks again for these great webinars. You're welcome. Let's see. Do either H1 or H2 blocking antihistamines cause any immune suppression? Have you found any antihistamines in both categories that have worked better for your patients than others? Also, take a teaspoon daily of each of sodium bicarbonate and trisalt mixture, including calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, potassium carbonate to help reduce allergies. Is this an okay thing to do? So I don't see a problem with you doing that. Hold on just a minute. I knocked one of my lights over here with my feet. There we go. I gotta tangle my feet below there. I don't see whether you would hurt yourself doing this. But I'm not aware that they help allergies. I haven't seen anything about that. And, when I read about how to approach mast cell activation, which is trying to deal with mast cells that make histamines and they get overreactive sometimes in Lyme disease, I've studied the various ways of stabilizing your mast cells and dealing with the antihistamines. And I haven't seen that using a sodium and a calcium bicarbonate or calcium carbonate, sodium bicarbonate, magnesium carbonate, potassium carbonate mixtures is something that would work. So I'm not aware that it would. Okay. In terms of the H1 and H2 antihistamines, so everyone, H2 antihistamines would be your things that are made for allergies, like a Benadryl, Allegra, Zyrtec, those kind of medicines. Okay. And then your H1 blocking antihistamines would be things that are actually made to some of the drugs made to lower stomach acid. And those would be things like Pepcid, AC, ranitidine used to be one of those. But those you actually get over the counter. You don't need prescriptions for those. Okay. Keep in mind things like Prilosec are not H1 blockers. They work through a different mechanism at lowering stomach acid, and they're called proton pump inhibitors. They block a pump that helps create acid in your stomach. So it's a little bit different mechanism, okay? In terms of the difference between H1 and H2 antihistamines, your stronger antihistamines are the H2 family. And mainly the reason we're adding H1 when you have bad mast cell activation is to just add something that might give you a better layer of protection, if you will. What these H1, H2 blockers do is they bind to your histamine receptors to keep all these excess histamines from landing on there and attaching and giving you a lot of those allergic type reactions that people get, and mast cell type histamine excess reactions that people get. Okay. Within the family of H2 blocking antihistamines, your strongest ones would be your most sedating ones. So Benadryl is probably your strongest one. Okay. Things like they would be the stronger ones. Okay. Then your newer generations of H2 blockers, which would be your Zyrtecs, your Allegras, your Claritins, they tend not to be as strong as Benadryl. And within those, among the various other ones besides Benadryl, it's all hit or miss as to which one's going to work better for somebody than somebody else. Okay. Within the H1 blocking families, again, that's hit or miss as to which one's going to work better for somebody than somebody else. Okay. All right. Anyhow, I think that settles that. All right. Good luck to you, Jim. Thanks for a question. Hello, S. Let's see. Happy solstice, Dr. Marty. Thank you. Happy solstice to you too. Can you please speak about what role, if any, MSM and sulfur in general plays in the treatment of tick-borne infections? Is there a specific brand you recommend? Thanks. So in theory, there's a theory. So sometimes sulfur-containing medicines like MSM, in theory, may help break down biofilms. Okay, that would be the main reason to use them. I, to be honest, haven't seen much benefit in that in terms of something that really works well at breaking down biofilms. It's one of those things. I'm sure somebody has posted something somewhere about it, but I haven't had much benefit by doing that at all. Okay, and let's see, is there a specific brand you recommend? Not necessarily on that one, okay, because I don't use it. I've tried using it before in the past and didn't see much benefit from it, so I don't carry it, and so I don't have a specific brand on that one, okay? All right. Thanks for our question. Hello, Colleen. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Is there a test to tell whether the covering of your mitochondria has been injured? So mitochondria, everyone, are your energy factories found in our cells. And by some estimates, there's 300 to 400 mitochondria in a cell. In the covering of a mitochondria is a bilayer of fat or bilipid layer of fatty acids. And then on the inside of the mitochondria is where sugar and fat are burned through a bunch of chemical reactions into creating a type of cell fuel called ATP. Okay. One of the things that can happen in chronic Lyme disease in situations that lead to an overproduction of oxidizing agents by the immune system, these excess oxidizing agents can damage fatty acids that make up your mitochondrial covering, basically. And if they get injured, then you have poorer uptake of the fat, especially into the inside of your mitochondria, and possibly of your sugar getting in as well, too. Okay. You also may have some interruption of the ability of the healthy covering to donate electrons into some of the chemical processes that create this ATP cell fuel. So if you get injured covering, you may have sluggish energy generation, okay? Now, within the mitochondria, there is a chemical reaction cycle, something we call the Krebs cycle, that has a bunch of organic acids that are in it that are created and processed as part of Krebs cycle. There are some companies that do organic acid tests looking at the products within the Krebs cycle, and they test for those levels. And if one of them is high and a bunch of other ones are low, that may suggest that you're not having adequate production within Krebs cycle, and therefore maybe your mitochondria aren't working well. Notice the words I'm saying maybe. The trouble is these tests of organic acids have never really been validated to show that what's going on with the levels of the organic acids has anything to do with the amount of ATP that's produced. So they're not necessarily valid ways of looking at the chemical reaction process. In terms of looking at a specific test to see if the covering is damaged, there isn't a specific test that does that. Some people would say do your organic acid testing for mitochondrial function, and if those organic acids are off, that could suggest injury to the covering. But again, there's nobody that's actually validated that as a way to do it. Okay? All right. Thanks for your question, Colleen. Hello, Dave. Lastly, can you drink wine while on these natural binders? Thanks once again, and happy holidays to you and your fur babies. Those fur babies are here. One of them is itching her little heart out under my desk. Oh, I guess Mr. Thor is back there. I don't know if you guys noticed, but Thor, one of my Basenjis, is there, and Halo is under the desk just scratching away right now. So anyhow, thanks for the happy holidays. I appreciate that. You too. In terms of can you drink on binders? The binders themselves aren't going to cause any problems to your liver. So yeah, you could drink on them. Again, as you know, with using binders, it's okay to have food while you're using during the time period you're on your binders. The only thing is the ideal time to eat anything, whether it's drinking alcohol or whether it's having regular food, would be about 30 minutes after you take your binders. And the reason for that is every time that you eat, it causes your gallbladder to contract. And the gallbladder then squeezes its contents out into the small intestines. One of the things that gets stored in the gallbladder are your mold toxins. And so if you eat something half an hour after you take your cholestyramine, during that half-hour period of time, or whatever binder you're using, during that half-hour period of time, the binder has worked its way out of your stomach downstream into the small intestines at the point that the gallbladder opens up and squeezes its contents out. Okay, so it's like having the baseball mitt there right when the baseball is thrown so that you can catch the stuff, basically. Okay, that's half an hour. So that's why we say an ideal time to eat is half an hour after you have your binder. Okay, all right. Good luck to you, Dave. Hello, Dave again. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Is there some kind of blood test from either LabCorp or Quest that can determine whether I am genetically prone to mold toxicity? If so, could you kindly let me know what that is called? You have mentioned in previous webinars that some of us are genetically programmed to become our own mold brew pub and trying to figure out if I'm one of those unlucky individuals. Thank you. All right. So the pioneer, I'll call him that, the pioneer of mold toxicity and helping us understand the impact of mold toxicity is a physician named Ritchie Shoemaker. Now, many of us learned from him and follow some of his teachings, but have moved beyond him because a lot of his teachings just don't apply in Lyme disease. But which Dr. Shoemaker was able to show is that about 25% of all people have a genetic predisposition such that they cannot remove mold toxins once they get into them, okay? Which is a separate issue from being your own mold brew pub. I'll say something about that in a minute. So what happens in 75% of us when we breathe in or drink in mold toxins, they get absorbed into our bloodstream. And then within our blood, some immune cells will come along and tag those mold toxins, and then other immune cells will come in and break those mold toxins down. And then we don't have problems with them, okay? That's what happens in 75% of people. 25% of people have this genetic defect, though, or programming error, where their immune cells will not tag the mold toxins. And because they're not tagged, they don't get broken down by the immune system. And then what happens is they go to the liver can't transform them the way the liver's supposed to, and they come out of the liver still as a fat-based mold toxin. They go into the intestines and they get reabsorbed again. Okay. So one problem that people have, and this is the major problem that most people have with mold toxicity, is that their mold toxins don't get broken down. They just keep recirculating. So you have a swimming pool of mold toxins that you acquired from your environment, either your food or by breathing them in a building. Okay. The test that can see if you are one of those people that is genetically programmed incorrectly is a test that you can get through LabCorp. It's called an HLA-DR test. Okay, HLA-DR. And if you have a certain profile on that, it would suggest that you're going to have difficulty removing mold toxins. Okay, now I want to make a comment about that too. So our genetic profile is our blueprint of how something is supposed to work. Okay, and so you got the blueprint. And then you got environment and stresses in our lives and the food we eat that all interact to create a way that blueprint gets interpreted. Okay. And that's called epigenetics. It's how the world around us interacts with our blueprint. So just having a genetic blueprint and having a test that says you might develop mold toxicity doesn't mean you will, because our environment can intervene and what happens with that blueprint. Okay. Likewise, I have seen people with the normal genetic blueprint when I used to do the blueprint testing that were normal, but I still had strong suspicion they have mold toxicity, and I treated them for mold toxicity anyhow, and they got better. Okay. Now I don't, in the early days, that's all we could do is rely upon Shoemaker's HLA-DR test. And then Shoemaker would also have us measure some chemicals, inflammatory chemicals in the blood. One of those is VEGF, something called TGF-beta1, something called C3A, C4A. These are tests that you would do under a Shoemaker protocol, where Shoemaker looks to see if you have the genetic profile, and then he looks to see, do you have enough inflammatory markers? And if you got the two together, that must be mold toxicity. Okay. But there's one problem with the Shoemaker protocol, is that it doesn't do anything to actually measure whether the mold toxins are in you. All right. And all these inflammatory markers that Shoemaker says to measure actually can be wrong because you have chronic active Lyme disease making them wrong. All right. So because of that, most of us that treat chronic Lyme do not do these Shoemaker tests. What we really are interested in is, are those mold toxins in you? Okay. And the way we do that is we do urine testing to see if you have the mold toxins in you. All right. Now, I know Shoemaker has made some claims that urine testing may not be accurate because some of the things it's picking up are toxins you would get from your food. I think it's the best we can do when you have chronic Lyme disease, unfortunately. Okay. All right. Now, the other issue about this brew pub that I talk about is a separate issue, which is sometimes not only when you have been in your building full of mold and you breathe all those toxins in and they get trapped in you, one of the additional things that can happen occasionally, not in everyone, okay, but occasionally, is sometimes you'll breathe in the mold spores from those buildings. They get trapped up here in your sinus passages or in your intestines, and then those mold spores start producing mold toxins in you. All right. So you become your own brew pub. All right. Unfortunately, we don't have great testing that we can do that says you have mold spores caught up here or mold spores caught in your intestines. All right. And so my approach generally is to just use binders alone for about 6 months and see what happens to mold toxins. If they're not getting better, and if somebody has cleaned out their home and work environments, and I know they're not getting exposed any further at home or in work, and repeat mold testing comes back showing they probably have increased levels of toxins or they're not dropping, then I start wondering, are they also colonized? And then I will add things in to start treating for those mold spores, all right, to kill them. All right. So up in the nose, I might do silver nose sprays. I might do amphotericin nose sprays. I might do itraconazole nose sprays. For the intestines, I might use amphotericin. I might use itraconazole pills, basically. Okay. All right. All right. I hope that clarifies all that for you, Dave. Good luck to you. Hello, Robert. Say, hi, Dr. Ross. I love the cover on your new book. You found my new page. I just launched my new book pages at my store and at my Lyme disease information site. See, the store I think I launched yesterday, and the Lyme disease information site page I launched today. So yes, I have a new book. Let me show you the covering that Dave is talking about. So I am really thrilled with my book cover. I worked with a well-known Alaskan artist on this who does printmaking, line-to-cut print. She's a line-to-cut print maker and has a very whimsical style. And so she's a friend. And she had pointed out to me at one time, she said, so she asked me about my other book. She goes, did you sell much? And I said, well, yeah, they're moderate sells. And she looked at the book cover and she goes, of course it was only moderate. Look at that book cover. She goes, we got to do better. So I took her challenge and had her help design a cover for me. So let me just do a screen share here so you guys can see that. Let's see here. Oops, hold on. I gotta pull out. I gotta do one other step here. I forgot to launch my other pages. Just a minute here. All right, let me try to launch this again. All right, so this is my store. Okay, so the way to get at my new book is here, and the book I'm calling my new book, Hacking Lyme Disease, an Action Guide to Wellness. And this is the book cover. So, I asked her to come up when I tried to develop, or when I was developing the book, I said I wanted to convey two things, the book cover to convey two things. Number one was hope, and number two was authority. And for authority, she suggested I put my name up at the top here because I'm recognized as a Lyme authority, and that's how I would show it. And then she proposed a number of things, but I kept coming back to the idea she had for using a butterfly, because it is very hopeful and it is all about metamorphosis and change. And so I went with it. And so this is the book cover. And here's the back of that book cover, which is interesting, is she carried the butterfly wing design onto the back here. The butterfly wing also, you can't quite see from here, but this on the side of the book here, the butterfly continues over onto the side as well too. So anyhow, in terms of this book, everyone, you can take a look here, but my book is going to be ready to be, is going to be coming out in the first week or two of January. I'm actually just waiting on a I'm self-publishing it through Amazon self-publishing. And I'm waiting for a printed copy of it to come to me so I can read it in my hands and make sure that the printing of the artwork turned out correct and that all the words are in the way I want them to be in there. And I'm anticipating, after my review, that book is supposed to be, to me, the proof of the book is supposed to be here on Friday. I'm anticipating launching right after the first of the year. Okay. All right. If you want to know what's in the book, you can take a look here. Basically, this is a much bigger book than I did with my last book. As many of you know, my last book was called Anti-Germ Action Plans for Lyme Disease, where I gave you my Ross Lyme support protocol. And I also gave you plans on treating each of the infections you might see in Lyme disease. This book is bigger, and it includes my protocol. It includes all of my action plans, but they've all been updated. In addition, I put some information in there about, I reviewed various forms of alternative medicines. I talk about peptides in there. I've got information on treating persisters in there. And so basically, and I've got a whole background section in there about what do you need to know before you start treating? What are some key things that can influence whether you're going to have a successful treatment? Okay. I talk about how to protect your microbiome. I talk about things that lead to failed treatments and what you can do at the beginning to prevent those from happening. There's my Ross Lyme support protocol. Here is the section on all of the germs that I have information on how to treat. Here's a section where I review various forms of alternative medicines like hyperthermia, Rife machines, SOT treatment. I have a chapter on specific antimicrobials like Disulfiram and Dapsone. And then I've added in sections on key information you'll find helpful, like how to deal with the Herxheimer reaction. What about mold toxin illness, mast cell activation, information about peptides, how to fix mitochondria, naltrexone, and then my yeast screening questionnaire. So the book is much more comprehensive than last time. As many of you know, when I published the last book, it was basically a compilation of articles from my Lyme disease information site. This one is too. It's a compilation of nearly 40 different articles, but I've updated all of those articles as part of writing this book. I hired an editor and got them all cleaned up so they're maybe a little clearer and more readable than before. And the reason I chose to publish is about 80% of people still prefer to have hard copies of something in front of them. I know it's all available online, but people still like to have something that they can read and carry. I chose to do this as a 7x10 production because I wanted to have it to be big enough, like a workbook, that you could literally write in it and make notes in it as you were doing it. So it's a pretty substantial size as well too. And yeah, so it's taken a lot of time. Even though these were articles I had written before, I had to pull them all over, format them, clean them up, etc. It's taken a lot of time. So, but look for the book to be ready in the first week or two of January. You'll be able to get it at my supplement store. You'll also be able to get it on Amazon, and there will be a Kindle edition as well too. Okay. Anyhow. Thanks, Robert. You just gave me a chance to announce my book. And yeah, I'm very, very excited about that butterfly covering. Thank you for pointing it out. Oh, the artist is Yvonne Zerbets, by the way, and you can find her work. She's got a whole portfolio of work at Yvonne Zerbets. That's ZERBETZ.com. Okay, she's a wonderful artist. Hello, Alexander. Let's see. Hello, Dr. Ross. I'm 45 male and currently treating for mold using binders. Recently, labs came back with my cholesterol being high, and my regular doctor prescribed Crestor for 2 to 3 months. He believes this will lower my levels. Should I stop mold treatment while on this medication? Once I'm done, then restart the binders and continue the mold treatment, or treat both at the same time? My regular doctor says it should be fine, but he's not a mold Lyme doctor. I'm concerned that if I treat both at the same time, might be a lot for my system and really knock me down. I've also read that Crestor can inflame the liver and it interacts with glutathione, which I'm also taking. Does Lyme, BART, babesia yeast, or mold toxicity elevate cholesterol or glucose levels? Okay, that's a lot of questions there. All right, so first of all, one thing I've learned recently, and this actually maybe the last 2 or 3 months, is that cholesterol can go up as part of inflammation. And I didn't realize that before, but I've had a number of patients I know that I'm treating, and when they start having a lot of Herxheimer reactions, sometimes we'll just randomly do a cholesterol, or their primary care provider does a cholesterol check and it'll be elevated. And what I've come to learn is that sometimes as part of the cytokine inflammatory process of Herxheimer reactions and Lyme, that it's possible cholesterol could be elevated for those reasons. Okay. Right. Now, keep in mind what you're worried about with cholesterol is long-term elevations may lead to deposits forming in your blood vessels, leading to heart disease and strokes down the road. Okay. But acute elevations probably are not going to be the problem. So as you treat Lyme, presumably you're going to get inflammation under better control, and maybe the cholesterol levels will drop. Also be aware that people that have Lyme have other problems too, okay? So it's possible that if you have elevated cholesterol, it has nothing to do with inflammation for Lyme. It's because you're genetically programmed in a way to produce too much cholesterol. That's the majority of problem people have. It's not one of cholesterol intake. It's rather that their body just manufactures too much cholesterol, okay? So in terms of what it sounds like your provider is doing, is he's putting you on Crestor to see will it lower your cholesterol levels. And he's saying probably what he's doing is saying that at 2 to 3 months, he's going to have you back and recheck your levels to make sure it's working. Okay. In all likelihood, he or she is probably not planning on stopping it at 2 to 3 months, because managing cholesterol is something that you have to do on an ongoing basis to keep it from going back up. So just be aware of that as well too. Okay. Now I don't know what he's doing, he or she's doing for sure, but that's probably what they're doing. Okay. They're doing a check in 2 to 3 months to make sure that the drug is working for you. Now, one thing you should be aware of with your cholesterol lowering medicines, the statins, is that they can lower your coenzyme Q10 levels. And so one thing, if he or she did not tell you to do this, one thing that is helpful is to be on coenzyme Q10 while you're taking these. And remember, coenzyme Q10 is an antioxidant that's critical for proper functioning of your mitochondria. Okay. All right. So usually I advise people to be taking at least 200 milligrams a day of coenzyme Q10. If you're looking for a product that is that strength, Research Nutritionals has a product called CoQ Power or CoQ10 Power. We'll look at it here in a minute. That is a 200 milligram pill. And I usually have people take 1 time a day. Okay. Most doctors know to tell their patients when they put them on statins to be on CoQ10. Is pretty well known even in the conventional community. But be aware of that in case your provider didn't do that. That's a common issue with being on the statins, so they can lower coenzyme Q10. Okay. Can you take your binders and the statins together? Absolutely. They're working through 2 different mechanisms, and those binders may even help lower dietary cholesterol from being absorbed. But keep in mind that dietary cholesterol that you eat only contributes to about 10% of your total body cholesterol. Most of your cholesterol is actually made in your liver. Okay. All right. Let's see if I answered all of your questions here. Yeah, I have people that are on their binders and take their statins without any problems at all. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Alexander. Thanks for the question. Oh, let me show you that coenzyme Q10 I was telling you about. All right. Okay, so it is called CoQ10 Power, and this is the Research Nutritionals product. Actually, I guess it's a 400 milligram. Well, actually, let me see something here. Oh, it's 400 milligrams. All right. I have people take 1 of these, which is a 400 milligram pill. So I misspoke on how strong the pill is. I usually have people take 1 pill. Okay. All right. All right. Thanks, Alexander. Good luck to you. Hello, Dave. All right, Dave, this is going to be my last question I take from you, so I make sure we get time to get at everyone else's questions too. But let's see, are there any long-term health effects as a result of using natural mold binders? What's the max you usually recommend your patients stay on them until you decide that they are more than likely a self-producing mold factory? Also, at what point do you stop treatment? Is it once you retest with real-time labs and have reached normal levels, do you continue treatment for an additional month or 2 after normal levels have been reached just to make sure? Okay, so I already talked about the issue about who becomes a mold producing factor or a toxin producing factory, so I want to address that. In terms of the long-term problem I see with mold binders is some people get constipated on them, although typically with your GI detox and your Mycopol by research nutritionalists, I tend not to see constipation as an issue with those, okay? The other thing that can happen is with these binders that have charcoal in them, charcoal sometimes can remove minerals, bind up minerals actually. And for some people that can result in hair loss. So if you start having increased hair loss on your binders that contain charcoal in them, then one thing I'll have people do is add core minerals in. And there's a research nutritionalist product called Core Minerals, and I'll have a person take a couple pills once a day. And often that's going to be enough to stop the hair loss from happening, but be aware of that, okay? And then in terms of determining when somebody is done, basically I stop treating once once somebody is in normal range on their real-time labs, okay? Now, if I've got a person that I think is going to still have ongoing mold exposures from either their environment or from their home, I might leave them on some binders, but usually at a reduced level. So for instance, if I had them taking 2 GI detox pills twice a day, what I might do to kind of police the environment to keep their mold to keep mold toxins from building up. So I might have them take 1 or 2 pills a day, okay? As an alternative, one of my first patients that I even discovered had mold toxicity, this was before we had real-time labs and the urine testing, was a patient of mine that was one of the sickest people I've ever taken care of. And we discovered, really just kind of as a Hail Mary move, that putting her on cholestyramine made all the difference. And so, for instance, she's a woman that had a Canadian patient of mine that had been bitten while doing missionary work in New Zealand and had a bullseye rash, had everything that said acute Lyme, had positive testing, was just terribly debilitated with pain, energy 0 out of 0. She would have daily seizures and stop breathing. I mean, she was sick. And we put her on IV antibiotics, did that for about 1.5 years, 2 years, and really got maybe 10 or 15% better, and that was it. And I knew I was missing something, but kind of as a Hail Mary, we decided, here, try this cholestyramine. This is, I didn't even bother doing the HLA-DR testing. I just said, try cholestyramine. And within a month, her seizures were gone, pain was down about 90%, and she was up out of bed, moving around, had no problem at all. It took about 3 or 4 more months to get her all cleaned up. We never had to treat with mold killers at all in her. And now what she does is about maybe once a year, she'll start feeling mold toxic, and she'll do cholestyramine or a binder for about a few weeks and then get back on her way. So she just uses how her body feels to decide if it's time to take binders or not, okay? All right. So I'm not sure that's for everybody to do it that way, but that's how she's found it successful for her, okay? Thanks for your question, Dave. Hello, Gail. Yeah, I guess it is morning in Sydney. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad you're able to join us. Hello, Heather. Let's see, Dr. Ross. My naturopath has a PEMF mat that I'm considering using. Do you know how they work? And are they helpful for pain and inflammation? Thank you and Merry Christmas. So Merry Christmas to you too. PEMF stands for Pulsed Electromagnetic Fields. It's basically a mat that uses electrical currents and it pulses them, creating a magnetic field around you. You know, what I have found them to be helpful for, any of these, whether it's a beamer or a PEMF, is that they tend to help with pain and inflammation. I can't explain why, but I know that people have had benefits more on the pain and inflammation side of things, okay? Yeah, give it a try and see. I don't know that it will work, but for a number of my patients that have tried it, they have gotten benefit out of it, okay? All right, good luck to you. Hello, Kobe. Let's see, Dr. Marty here. Some people do well on Disulfiram. Others get some severe reactions or die off. any way to mitigate the side effects? Any thought effects on what causes some to have such a bad time with disulfiram? Okay, so disulfiram, was the wonder drug a few years ago. It was so disulfiram, everyone, as many of you know, is a drug that has been repurposed from treating alcoholism. And the reason it's used in alcoholism is that it when a person that is drinking is on disulfiram, they're going to get acutely ill with nausea, headaches, and it's supposedly if they're taking it, it's act as a deterrent to keep them from drinking. Okay, but it was discovered in some experiments by Dr. Rohatis and his research team at Stanford University, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago now, that at least in laboratory experiments that it would treat persisters. And they eventually discovered in some mouse experiments, I believe, that it also will treat growing Lyme, although it's not the greatest agent against growing Lyme. All right. So based on those studies, a colleague of mine, Dr. Ken Liegner, had a patient approach him and asked if he would try the disulfiram for him. And then eventually Dr. Liegner treated about 70 people with this, and he published studies saying how effective it is. All right. So in what Dr. Liegner's data shows, and this is what I see in my practice as well too, is that disulfiram helps about 35% of people to get into some form of extended remission. Maybe it gets rid of Lyme altogether. Okay. All right. So about 35% of the time. The problem is, though, is one of side effects and being able to tolerate a disulfiram treatment. So it can lead to some pretty severe Herxheimer reactions. And because of that, many of us have discovered that you have to start really low and slow with your dose and take about 3 to 4 months to gradually build up to a peak dose. And then we leave you at that peak dose for about 4 months. Okay. All right. So it becomes about an 8-month treatment. Okay. Now, when you're a few other things about it, it can help treat Lyme and persister Lyme, but it does not treat Bartonella. All right. So there's been some other studies done showing that it's not an effective agent against Bartonella. It has some action against babesia, but I don't find it to be a very strong treatment. Okay. So what I tend to use it on is people that have done, years of antibiotics, and we've even done some other things to deal with persisters, and they're not getting better. I might try it there. Okay. The other thing I'll do is if somebody has done disulfiram, they got better, and then after it stopped, they get worse again. When I put them back on it again, I'm likely to have them be on some things that target growing Lyme in addition. Okay, so let me be clear about my terms here. So persisters are hibernating forms of Lyme. Hibernating growth state of Lyme. There's also a growing state of Lyme. Okay, all right. Probably about 90% of your germs are in this growing state, and about 10% or so are in these hibernating persister states. That's at least according to lab experiments. All right. Now, in these growing and persister states, there are different ways the germ looks. Okay. So you may be familiar with something called a spirochete. That's the corkscrew looking thing. You may be familiar with what are called Lyme cyst. Okay. So those are ways that Lyme lives outside of your cells. Lyme also has an appearance that is an inside the cell appearance, and that's called an L form, where it loses its covering. Okay. We think, and lab experiments show, that both cyst and spirochetes can be growing or hibernating. We don't know for sure whether the L form, the kind that lives inside your cells, can be hibernating or not, because we can't look inside a cell to see. Okay, we just don't know about that. All right. So now so the thing about using disulfiram, there's a few things. Number one, you can get some really hard Herxheimer reactions. And so you have to go low and slow. Okay. The other thing is there's some other side effects you need to be aware of. About 50% of the time that people use disulfiram, they're going to have very low energy from just being on it. Okay. About 15. Actually, let's look at the article. I'm blanking here. There's some other side effects I just need to make you aware of. Let me pull up the article here. So there's also issues of psychiatric problems, and there's issues of neuropathy that you should be aware of too. So let me just hold on here. I'm blanking on the stats on those. Okay, so this is what Liegner's data tells us, is that he says that about 92.5% of people have varying degrees of improvements. 36.4% get into a long-term remission, okay? About 50% have fatigue. About 31% have psychiatric problems, okay? And you can get some really crazy stuff here, like bad hallucinations, severe depression, and anxiety. About 15% develop neuropathy, and about 15% have liver enzyme elevation. Okay, now here's the problem with the neuropathy I'm discovering, is that there is a very small percentage of people that the neuropathy becomes a permanent problem, all right? So you have to be aware of that when you're considering whether to do disulfiram, is that you could be left with some permanent damage. In a very small percentage of people, I've had that happen before, okay? And then the other thing to be aware, because it's such a hard drug to take because of these side effects and because of Herx's, only 50% of people are even able to make it up to the target dose. They may still get benefit from being less than a target dose, but you have to be aware of that, okay? Now, things you can take to help mitigate the problems that people get. Okay, so in terms of how to dose it, I have a whole description here about how you dose it, how do you determine what you're going to do. All right, so in terms of suggested supplements that I advise people to be on when they do it, I'd like people to be on curcumin to control the cytokines. I'd like people to be on the glutathione. Okay, in terms of helping with the neuropathy to prevent it from happening or to deal with it, I like people to be on a B complex. I'd like them to be on zinc, and I like them to take glutathione. All right. And then there are some things you need to avoid, which is things that are basically alcohol or alcohol-like, okay? So that would be things like beer and wine. You want to avoid alcohol-based tinctures, vanilla extracts, fermented foods, mustard, vinegar, soy sauce, and sugar alcohols, okay? I list them all out here. So you got to do quite a bit in your life to deal with this, okay? So I'm tending, although I think this is one of the stronger drugs we have for persisters, I'm tending to use it these days with caution because of that neuropathy problem, the psychiatric problems, and the fact that really only about 30 to 35% of people are going to get into any kind of extended remission on it. Okay? All right. The other thing I want to say about it is I don't use it in acute Lyme. There's no data that shows it works. And I tend not to use it for people that it's the first thing they're ever taking. Because again, I think it's weak in terms of something that treats growing Lyme. And I think we should use more traditional treatments to deal with growing Lyme, okay? So when I start my treatments these days, I'm trying to do something that treats growing Lyme in all of its various forms, so spirochete, cyst, intracellular, okay? And I'm trying to put people on something to do with persisters. Generally, what I'm doing is I'll put them on either herbs that treat the growing spirochete, cyst, and intracellular. And then I will also put them on an herbal supplement made up of cinnamon, clove, oregano that treats the persisters. Okay, this is based on Johns Hopkins research. Or I will use that same liposomal cinnamon, clove, oregano, and I might use prescription antibiotics like doxycycline and tinidazole, for instance, to treat their growing forms of Lyme, and then use the liposomal cinnamon, clove, oregano over here. Okay, all right. So if you want to read more about options to treat persisters, because there's a lot more you can do besides use just the disulfiram. Again, you know, a few years ago, everyone was going on disulfiram, but I think many of us have been tempered. I still recommend it as something to try. If everything else has failed, this might be something you want to do. But there's other ways to approach persisters. So for information about that, take a look at my infection treatment plan section here. And then there's this article called How to Treat Persister Lyme and Bartonella. And in here, I review various ways of treating persisters, like the disulfiram, methylene blue, cinnamon, clove, oregano, the herbs Cryptolapis, Japanese knotweed, and cat's claw are options, okay? And so I review what you can do for them here, okay? Now, there was another drug that Dr. Rojadas had discovered could be effective against persisters and growing, and it was a form of penicillin called azacitidine. And this was a couple years ago, and his finding that azacitidine could do this kind of shook the world. Everyone wanted to be on azacitidine. The trouble is, although it is an FDA-approved drug, it's not being manufactured. No one makes it. And so we thought maybe that it would come to market pretty quickly. There was a company called FlightPath that has been trying to develop that drug and put it back into production, but they decided to walk away from it. And part of the reason they decided to walk away from it is they were concerned there might not be a big enough market for it actually. And part of that is that in the world of antibiotics these days, antibiotics are trying to be developed that are more targeted versus azacitidine is broad spectrum. It may kill a lot of different things, including a lot of good bacteria in your gut. The pharmaceutical industry is trying to shy away from those drugs these days that are a gunshot that can kind of clobber a lot of the good bacteria in the gut, and they're tending to go for more ones that don't do that. And so the FlightPath has decided not to go further with their development of azacitidine. At least that's based on conversations I had with their CEO in May of this year. Okay, all right. Good luck to you, Kobe. Hello, Jen. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you so much for your time. You're welcome. I was told to take probiotics away from prescription antibiotics. Is it true for herbal antibiotics as well? Do you recommend castor oil packs for detox? Do fiber nests cause muscle fatigue? I feel as if I just finished running a marathon after climbing the stairs sometimes. Thank you again. All right. So number of questions there. Let me see what we can do for that. So first of all, in terms of prescription antibiotics versus herbal antibiotics and their effect on the good bacteria of the intestines and the good bacteria in your probiotics, okay? So your prescription antibiotics are going to be stronger at hurting the good bacteria in the intestines and hurting or killing the probiotics, all right? However, I do think that even the herbal antibiotics sometimes can have an effect on your probiotics. It's not as great of an effect. It's a smaller effect. And the reason I say that is I've had people on all herbal antibiotic regimens before, and occasionally they'll develop intestinal yeast overgrowth. The way they're getting intestinal yeast overgrowth is something is disrupting the good bacteria in the intestines that keeps those yeast under control, because yeast live in our intestines naturally. If you take prescription antibiotics, you knock down good bacteria, then yeast that live in the intestines grow too much. I've seen that happen with herbal antibiotics, although it's rarer that it happens compared to prescriptions. So I do think that the herbal antibiotics can knock down good bacteria in your intestines and even the good bacteria in your probiotics. So yeah, I would try to separate the amount of time you take between your herbal antibiotics and your prescriptions. You know, generally, if you're doing herbal antibiotics twice a day, somewhere in the middle of the day is when I would do your probiotics. That's generally what I tell people to do. Try to take them as far away from the dosing of your herbal or prescription antibiotics as you can. Okay. Castor oil packs for detox. So what castor oil does is you soak a towel in castor oil and you put it on your abdomen, put some plastic over the top of it, and you put a heating pad on the top of it, okay? And that heat on the castor oil will increase blood flow around the abdomen, around your skin, and then things that are fat-based will get absorbed into this castor oil pack. So in theory, it's a way to pull some toxins out. You know, I don't know that it works that well. I don't recommend it, but it could work. I don't think you'll hurt yourself by giving it a try, okay? And then these fiber nests that Jen's asking about. So both Bartonella and Babesia germs have an ability to wrap themselves in the blood clotting protein in our blood called fibrin. So fibrin is one of the proteins in your blood that leads and is part of blood clots, okay? But what Bartonella and Babesia can do is they mix themselves in fibrin, creating these germ fibrin nests. And then these nests can stick themselves on your blood vessel walls, and they become hard to get antibiotics in the immune system into to kill the germs, all right? So in both my babesia and Bartonella treatment protocols, I'm now suggesting about 2 to 3 months into those treatments, if you're not making headway, start on lumbrokinase, which is an enzyme made by earthworms to help break down the fibrin in those fibrin nests. And I have some good success doing that, okay? Could it lead to muscle fatigue? I mean, in theory, yeah. I mean, because these fibrin nests stuck on your blood vessel walls limit blood flow into tissues, especially when they clog up the smaller blood vessels, all right? So is that part of your problem? Maybe. I haven't seen any research that suggests that, though, okay, but maybe in theory. I will also tell you, though, that one of the reasons that people, in my practice, when I see somebody that has a lot of fatigue with activity, I'm thinking of mitochondria dysfunction, okay? So I mentioned mitochondria earlier today, and the fact with mitochondria is that the covering can get injured. Once the covering is injured, you have inadequate energy generation on the inside. So the way I like to approach mitochondria dysfunction and somebody that fatigues out really easily with exercise, I'll start trying to do mitochondria repair. And so what I like to do is something that repairs the phospholipids. And there are 3 products that I have that you could use. 2 of them are very similar. One is a product by Research Nutritionals, which is called ATP 360. It's their proprietary mix of phospholipid fats, and it has a number of nutrients in it that help your mitochondria work better, okay? One of the nutrients in there, though, is coenzyme Q10. I'll tell you why I said that in a minute. That replaces an older product by Research Nutritionals called ATP Fuel, and their phospholipid mix that's in ATP Fuel is something called NT Factor. All right, so another company makes NT Factor, Research Nutritionals puts it in their ATP Fuel, okay, and that also has some coenzyme Q10 in it. All right. In ATP 360, in which they don't use NT Factor, but they use their own proprietary mix of phospholipids, their research shows that it's a better product at improving energy than the ATP Fuel. It's also an easier to take product because it's 3 pills 1 time a day versus the ATP Fuel is 5 pills 3 times a day, 2 or 3 times a day. Okay. All right. Then Research Nutritionals also makes another product called NT Factor Energy, which has NT Factor in it that they buy from another company, and they put it in their product called NT Factor Energy. And then they also add a bunch of nutrients and help mitochondria. But that does not contain coenzyme Q10. All right. So you've got ATP 360, ATP Fuel with coenzyme Q10, NT Factor without coenzyme Q10. All right. Why am I talking about CoQ10? Well, if you're treating babesia with atovaquone, which is found in Mepron and also isn't found in Malarone, you do not want to take CoQ10 because it interferes with the activity of your atovaquone. All right. So if you're trying to do mitochondria repair and you are on Mepron or Malarone with atovaquone, then don't do an ATP 360 or an ATP Fuel. Do NT Factor Energy, and you would start at 2 pills 3 times a day. Okay. Now, in terms of mitochondria repair, because there are no tests that we can do that tell us for sure if we have mitochondria dysfunction, what I will tell people to do is do 2 months of mitochondria repair work. And if you're getting better energy, then do an additional 4. Okay. But you should know by about 2 months whether using an ATP 360 at 3 pills 1 time a day or an ATP Fuel at 5 pills 2 or 3 times a day. I have to read the label on that again. Or using an NT Factor as 2 pills 3 times a day. You should know by 2 months whether they're going to work or not. Okay. The other thing to do with your mitochondria repair is you need to be on a good antioxidant. And for that, I'd like to build up antioxidant levels in your mitochondria. And what I like to use to do that is liposomal glutathione. The liposomal glutathione product I like is one made by Research Nutritionals, which is their Tri-Fortify product. And I like having people take a teaspoon 1 time a day. All right. One other thing to keep in mind, if you have mitochondria injury and you're a vegetarian, you may need to supplement with carnitine. Carnitine is the transport vehicle that carries fat to the inside of the mitochondria. If you're vegetarian, your diet does not include red meat, and in red meat is carnitine. All right. So if you don't have red meat in your diet, and by red meat, I mean bison, beef, lamb. If you don't have red meat in your diet, then you also need to supplement carnitine. And usually people start a product called acetyl L-carnitine, which is by Thorne. And I'll have them do a 500 milligram pill twice a day, one pill twice a day. And after a month, decrease to one pill a day. Okay. And if you stay vegetarian, no red meat, then you need to stay on that carnitine even as you get better. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Jen. In terms, if you want more information to read about mitochondrial repair, I'll show you my article that I've written on that. So hold on here just a minute. Let's see here. Okay, so take a look at my, oops, what's going on there? That's interesting. Let's try that again. So look at my energy and fatigue chapter here. And then look at this article called How to Fix Mitochondria and Get Energy in Lyme Disease, right? Basically explain everything I just did, okay? This chapter, or this article here is actually one of the chapters within my new Lyme book called Hacking Lyme Disease, an Action Guide for Wellness. This will also be included in there in a cleaned up format, okay? All right. All right, good luck to you, Jen. Hello, Caroline. Just a question about babesia. How long would you recommend being on minocycline? Is 3 months too long? So in terms of treating babesia, a good treatment length is 4 to 5 months. And minocycline is a drug that you would combine with either, you would combine with an atovaquone containing agent like a malorone or a mepron. And you could use minocycline along with them. And I have people even use minocycline as part of their Lyme germ treatments too. And I'll have them take it up to 6 months at a time. Okay. All right. So yeah, that's what I do with my practice. Okay. All right. Good luck to you. Hello, Leslie. Let's see. Thank you again for these webinars. My question is there any harm in taking Cryptolapis if it turns out you actually don't have Lyme-Barton babesia? It just seems really hard to pinpoint exactly if one has one of these tick-borne infections. Hope you have a wonderful Christmas. Thank you. So, the major side effect of Cryptolapis is cost. It's not exactly a cheap herb, okay? Number 2, taste. It tastes very foul. It's a strong tasting herb, okay? And then beyond that, and then you may get some slight interruption of the good bacteria within your intestine, not as great as you might have with prescription antibiotics. But beyond that, I'm not seeing in my patients any side effects to worry about, okay? So those would be some things for you to keep in mind, okay? All right. Good luck to you, Leslie. Hello, Ricky. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Are there any antibiotics that you cannot mix with diflucan? Thanks for taking my question. So diflucan, which is also known as fluconazole, is in a family of antibiotics called the azoles, okay? The azoles can sometimes have a small chance of doing something called QT interval prolongation. What that means is they interfere with part of the electrical pulsing of your heart, okay? And not enough to really cause any problem, but there's a potential problem, all right? So other things that we might combine with diflucan would be the macrolides like azithromycin and clarithromycin. And both of those have a small chance of causing QT interval prolongation too. And so I prescribe that combination regularly, azithromycin with diflucan, clarithromycin with diflucan. But I usually am going to get a call from the pharmacist saying, you should be aware of this. And I say, I am. And generally, in people that are healthy, I don't worry about it. I haven't seen anybody develop problems with QT interval prolongation, okay? Now, The problem if you get QT interval prolongation is it can cause a heart arrhythmia, basically, a bad heart arrhythmia, all right? But I'll be honest, I haven't seen it happen, but that's something, you should be talking over with your physician to see if they have any concerns in you, if that would be a problem, okay? All right, but that in theory is about the only thing I would be worried about on diflucan, okay? The other one I might not mix is the rifamycins like rifampin and rifabutin. The reason is both diflucan and the rifamycins can lead to some liver inflammation in theory. All right, notice the word I said, in theory. All right, and so I don't like mixing those two drugs together because of a risk of liver inflammation. I will tell you, most of us, our physicians and healthcare providers, were taught in our schooling never use diflucan for more than a day or two because it's going to inflame the liver. I had that drilled into my head, and I think most physicians still think of it as that too. I'll be honest that I've just never seen anyone on diflucan get elevated liver enzymes. My standard way of treating too many yeast in the intestines is to combine 30 days of a drug called nystatin along with diflucan. And where I learned to do that is from a physician named Jacob Teitelbaum. Many of you may know Teitelbaum as somebody that wrote a book called From Fatigue to Fantastic. It was a book about how to treat chronic fatigue syndrome. And I studied under him, or went to a number of his workshops, in-person workshops back around 2002, I guess, maybe 2001, 2002, and started incorporating his way of using diflucan nystatin into my treatments. And I, at first, because I had it drilled into my head, be worried about liver inflammation on those, I had people do blood testing once a week to make sure their liver was fine. All right. And I must have done that for a good year. I'll be honest, in that whole year, I never saw anyone develop elevated liver enzymes. And so I think generally it's pretty safe to use. Okay. All right. Thanks for our question, Ricky. Hello, Shauna. Let's see. Have you ever had patients that had visual static snow 24/7, also double vision as well as palinopsia? After images, blurry vision, light-sensitive ghosting, crazy color swirls and patterns, floaters, nystagmus, etc. Do these visual disturbances go away with treatment? If so, did you use a combination of antibiotics and herbs? Okay, so visual snow and a lot of these vision changes you're describing here tend to be neurologic in nature. And so the two tick-borne infections that can have neurologic effects are Bartonella and Lyme. All right. And when I see somebody that has these kind of effects, even if their Bartonella testing is negative, I'm going to treat for both Lyme and Bartonella. I want at least one of those tests to be positive, though, before I say it's a tick-borne illness, okay? In other words, I'll be making a decision as to whether they have tick-borne illnesses based on their history, whether they had tick bite or tick exposures, whether or not they have all the other symptoms we might see in Lyme and Bartonella, and whether they have some testing that supports those diagnoses, okay? But if they at least have Lyme and they've got all of these neurologic situations going on, I'm going to cover for Bartonella regardless of whether the testing is positive or not, okay? Because the testing is not perfect for Bartonella, all right? And so those would be my comments, is work on treating Lyme, work on treating Bartonella. That's what I have found successful in these situations, okay? Whether it's herbal or prescription that you use, okay? There aren't any, consider using herbs to help facilitate nerve repair. Those would be things like using glutathione, 500 milligrams, one time a day. That would be 1 teaspoonful of that Trifortify. I also will try to do things to get inflammation down, like curcumin, which is the Thorn curcumin phytosome product. It's no longer called Mariva, but Thorn curcumin phytosome, 500 milligrams, 3 times a day. I might do that. And more recently, what I've started adding in to help with the nerve repair is to do a peptide product called BPC 157. Peptides are short strands of amino acids that are not long enough to be called a protein. we make a number of them naturally in our bodies, and one peptide we make naturally in our stomach lining is BPC 157, which I refer to as the Swiss Army knife of peptides. It does a number of things, but one of the things it can do is help with nerve and tissue repair, muscle and tendon repair, joint repair. So that's something else I've tended to add in. And that I usually start at 500 milligrams, one pill twice a day. Okay. So what I do with my patients that have this problem is treat Lyme, treat Bartonella, do some things specifically targeting nerve repair, which would be glutathione, curcumin to lower inflammation, BPC 157. And then finally, I might also do some lipid layer repair. Keep in mind, if you've got this kind of dysfunction, you probably have some mitochondria dysfunction, or people tend to have mitochondria dysfunction. And also the same bilipid fats that make up your mitochondria that get injured make up every one of your cell coverings as well too, and they get injured, all right? So I usually will wind up doing an ATP 360, 3 pills 1 time a day. That's what I do for patients of mine that have this situation. You should talk to your doctors and see if they agree with doing that for you as well too, because even though I'm talking broadly about what I do, again, I can't be your physician. These are things you should talk with them about, okay? All right, good luck to you. Hello, Heidi. Hold on here a minute, everyone. Hi, Dr. Ross. Thank you for hosting the webinars. My son is being treated for Lyme and co-infections, Bartonella babesia. His doctor recommended supplements ATP 360 and NRF2 activator to help with the fatigue and body aches that he has experienced as he is undergoing treatment. However, he is currently on atovaquone and azithromycin, and I read that ATP 360 contains CoQ10, which should not be taken while on atovaquone. Can you explain the interaction? If this supplement should not be taken, what do you suggest for fatigue? His fatigue and body aches are extreme, and he is feeling he will never get better. How long does it take for supplements to help? Is there anything else that can make you feel better? Okay, so again, besides doing the ATP 360, what I would recommend is what I talked about earlier. Do NT Factor Energy. It's a product by Research Nutritionals. It has no coenzyme Q10 in it, and I would do 2 pills 3 times a day. Off the top of my head, I don't know the specific interaction. I've looked at it before. I'm just not remembering, but there is an interference with the ability of atovaquone to kill babesia. So I just don't mix the two together. Okay. Let's see here. In terms of making him feel better, again, repair the mitochondria, I agree with that. You may want to take a look at my Ross Lyme support protocol, where I talk about the various things you should have as part of a treatment, like getting sleep, using medicines that are adaptogens that help your body deal with stress, like ashwagandha, doing things to lower cytokines. Here, let me show you the whole protocol just a minute. All right, so this is my Lyme protocol. And I have information here. So to treat somebody successfully for Lyme, you got to get sleep, all right? So I have information about that. That sleep helps deal with pain and lowers cytokine inflammation, okay? I like suggesting that people that treat Lyme be on a diet, a healthy diet, and I can give you some ideas here on how to do that. You want to lower inflammation made by a group of chemicals overproduced by your white blood cells called cytokines. Too many cytokines give you fatigue. They make it so you can't think. They disturb your sleep. They give you pain. They give you most of your Lyme symptoms, actually. So there's some steps you want to take to lower them. I like to have people be on an adaptogen, something that helps their body deal with stress. And what I like is the ashwagandha. I like to look and see if there are hormonal imbalances and correct for those. I like people to be on a multivitamin. I like doing some basic detox supports. I like having people exercise if they can. They may not be able to. I like to deal with too many yeast in the intestines. And then I like to do things to treat the infection, and I like to do the things to treat co-infections if they're there. Okay. Anyhow, these are just some basic steps that anyone in a Lyme treatment, in my opinion, should be doing. So these are things to help the whole body work better, basically. Okay. All right. Good luck, Heidi. Hello, Margot. Say good evening and happy holidays. So glad you are coaching us during this holiday season. You're welcome. Let's see. My question, can I take Synthroid with Berber, Panella, Incida acuta, and Houtenea without interaction? Do they all have to be spaced apart? I see no reason you can't take, well, I would not take your Synthroid with directly at the same time as Berber, Panella, Incida acuta, Houtenea, because it may decrease the absorption of the Synthroid. Okay. All the other ones you can take together at the same time. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Margot. Hello, Frank. Let's see. Hi, Dr. Ross. Can undiagnosed Lyme cause hypothyroidism? Yeah, it's a good question. So, as many of you know, Lyme causes an immune reaction resulting in the production of cytokines, okay? And as I was alluding to earlier, cytokines, excess cytokines cause a number of problems. Sleep disturbances, they give you fatigue, they make it so you can't think, they make you hurt all over. And excess cytokines interfere with the brain's regulation of all your hormonal systems. So maybe, okay, maybe it's possible. Good luck to you, Frank. Hello, Amy. Let's see. I have a Lyme, Bartonella, and babesia diagnosis and been on various antibiotics for 9 months. I've recently also been diagnosed with sinus tachycardia. Curious your thoughts and whether the heart condition is related to the infections, and if so, are there any specific treatment antibiotics that I should suggest to my treating doctor? Let's see. I have Lyme, Bartonella, and babesia diagnosis, been on various 9 months. I've recently been diagnosed with sinus tachycardia. So Lyme can sometimes cause heart arrhythmias. Babesia sometimes can cause some imbalance in your sympathetic, parasympathetic nervous system, which is your adrenaline, anti-adrenaline system. And if you get excess adrenaline, that sometimes can cause racing of the heart as well, too. So both of those could be related. There are no specific antibiotics that we use for people with heart conditions, though. We just treat as we would with all the options we have, the Lyme, Bartonella, and babesia, to get over them in terms of using antimicrobials. Okay? All right. Good luck to you, Amy. Hello, Caroline. Say happy holidays to you and all here. Thank you for all you do, Doctor. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Hello, Mickey. Let's see. Thanks for all your help, Dr. Ross. You're welcome. I've had Lyme for over 6 years, with 2016 being the worst year. After seeing many doctors and being on conventional herbal antibiotics, things calmed down to where it was somewhat manageable. However, since getting COVID vaccines and one booster, my EBV got elevated about a year ago. It came down slightly in April, but the numbers are once again quite elevated, indicating an active virus. I have done celery juice, detox teas, rotating many different antiviral supplements for over a year. Bi-monthly acupuncture, and eat a gluten-free, dairy-free, healthy diet. I also get monthly IVs of antibiotics, colloidal silver, under the guidance of an MD-ND. My biggest issues are unexplained weight gain, disrupted sleep, fatigue, brain fog, and I have been on LDN for over 5 years or 6 years. Hold on. Let me see if I can find another part here. So, Mickey, I don't see where the rest of your question is, but let me just make a comment here. So although you have elevated antibody levels for your viruses, that does not mean they're the problem. I mentioned that earlier tonight. You may just have elevated antibodies because your whole immune system, antibody system got turned on by all the vaccines, and you're making more, and it has nothing to do with the level of viruses. There's no studies that have been done that prove elevated antibodies mean elevated germ load. It may mean that your immune system is just doing a great job keeping EBV under control. Okay. Yeah. So anyhow, then you get into the whole thing about what to do in terms of reactions you might have had with COVID vaccines, et cetera. I'll be honest, I just don't have time to do it right now. It's 5:31 here already. So I'm sorry. I'm not going to be able to answer that question specifically right now. Okay. But I don't know that I would keep focusing on viruses. If you've done a lot of things for them, they're not making a difference. It may not have anything to do with viruses. Okay. All right. Good luck to you, Mickey. All right, everyone. Don't mean to end that on a downer note, but I've got to move on here. I've got 2 Basenjis that need to get out, and I've got some friends that I'm meeting for dinner here later on tonight too. So I'm glad to have closed out the year with all of you here tonight, and I do hope you all come back and join me again next year for our first series of webinars that will begin in January. I've enjoyed being with you here tonight, and I hope you're able to get some useful information here as well too. Just so you all know, I mentioned my new book. I will be sending out emails to everyone announcing when it actually is available. But again, look towards that being the first or second week in January by the time that it actually gets printed up through the self-publishing arm of Amazon. And then, so take a look at your email tomorrow morning. You'll get an email somewhere between 9 and 9:30 a.m. Announcing that the webinar recording is ready. On there, you'll also be able to sign up for the series of webinars in January. Share that email with anyone you think might get benefit from participating in these webinars or information that I shared with you here tonight as well too. Okay? All right. Happy holidays, everyone. We'll see you after the new year. And happy solstice. Yeah. All right. Bye, everyone.